Dr. Mary Ruppert-Stroescu is on the faculty at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. Her area of expertise is the use of textile and clothing to improve lives. She has been focusing on technological advancements such as smart and conductive textiles to improve health and well-being. Talk about working multidisciplinarily. Mary works with not only apparel design, but biomedical sciences, mechanical and computer engineering, bringing all these disciplines together to use textiles to improve our lives. You're going to hear about her work. I found it during the COVID epidemic. She has worked with people at BJC Healthcare to improve masks and gowning. So very interesting work. We're so glad that Mary's with us here today. And with that, I love your background, Mary, because it shows your figures, your mannequins back there to show us about a taste of its perfect background for you. So thank you, Mary. I'm going to turn it over to you at this point. All righty.
Okay, great.
And would you like, if people have a question, if they'd like to put it into chat or Q&A, Natalie, we didn't discuss this. We can kind of keep track of that and make sure at the end there's some time for Q&A and people can come off of their mic, come off of mute and ask, or put some questions in the Q&A. Is that how we want to do it, Natalie? Q&A or chat or both?
Q&A or chat is fine. Yep, either's fine.
Okay, terrific. Okay, thank you, Mary. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. I'm really very honored to be a speaker at this important event, or in this important organization that is looking to improve the lives, our lives as we age. I'm sure that you all, I'm like preaching to the choir, but I always tell people it's a privilege to be able to age. And when I found this image about how old is the new black, I think that really hit home because I was just on a chat the other day about, diversity. And one of the things that they were saying that might be one of our last frontiers of really talking about is ageism. And I think in fashion, a lot of times that is an issue, and so becoming more aware of both the fashion aspects of how you can feel better while you're aging and the new areas where technology can mix with medicine and engineering to create ways for us to manage our health even better has become one of my major passions. But you might be saying, why should we be looking at clothes? Well, clothing is one of the foundations of humankind. This rendering here is of the Otzi Iceman, who was found in the Alps near Italy, and he is dated to be over 3,500 years old. And the reason he's particularly interesting in our talk is that the level of technology that it took to make these striped fur and the pants that are very fitted and just all of the technological level for him 3,500 plus years ago to survive is still something that we need to think about very strongly today for us to survive. Clothing is also a very important aspect from an anthropological perspective because it's one of the things that distinguishes us from animals. Except for, of course, when we dress up our little kitties in clothes and then they have to suffer through that. But clothing is not only a psychological and an essential element of humankind, but it's also an important economic driver. And we're living in a very exciting time because there are all sorts of ways that the perception of clothing is changing. One of the social constructs that clothing gives us is this talk about age. And these girls here on the left-hand side, they're from a group in Japan called the Hirajuki, and they love to dress just really wild and crazy. And you might have heard about this group of women. They're all over 70. They live in New York, and they dress extravagantly as they want to. They don't care. So clothing can denote age, but it can also just denote your personality and what you want to wear. Another thing that we talk about in academia and the research about clothing is that there are four main reasons why we wear clothing. One is for protection from the elements, from the spirits, from danger. The other one is status. Then we have modesty and decoration. And, you know, I've got corresponding images here. You can kind of understand what those mean. But we live in a time right now where there's a new purpose for clothing that is for monitoring and assistance, excuse me, for health. And this is a thing from a website from a company called Hexoskin. They're out of Canada, and I've talked and kind of interacted with the founder. And they have these shirts that will give you an activity sensor. They'll sense your heart for the EKG, and then also sense your respiration. This company has evolved so well in the past 5 years that they are now working with NASA, and their shirts go up into outer space to monitor the astronauts. And excuse me. And so there, you know, there's a really vast amount of interest in being able to use clothing to monitor your health. And here on the right-hand side, they have an app where you can see your lungs like getting bigger and smaller as you breathe and your EKG. And, you know, I learned of this company, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I would have thought they would have been much more like household names, if you will. But this technology has got a lot of barriers to adoption. A lot of people don't want anyone to know what their heart rate is, and their privacy issues, and they're just all sorts of complex pieces around this idea of monitoring that is exciting because there's a lot of work to do and success to have, but it's also kind of frustrating because you would think that we would advance quicker in order for us to be able to continuously and remotely monitor our health, which is kind of where I'm going for. This company, Hexoskin, they have a very nice little EKG here, but it is just basically a one lead EKG. And so it gives you an idea, but it's not really medical grade. So what I do is I work with doctors, and Dr. Davila Roman here at WashU, who's the head of the cardiovascular lab, is working with me to parallel the technology that I'm developing to the Holter monitor, so that hopefully we'll be able to get medical grade signals from these textile sensing systems. So I'm going to go through a few more ideas, just general concepts that I'm sure, once again, I'm preaching to the choir, but I think it would be good for us to revisit. You know, the idea of clothing and age does create new challenges. I think this visual that we have here is very interesting. You can see on the far left, we have the default shape of someone probably in their early 20s, and then kind of an evolution of the body as we age. And even though like our circumferences might stay the same, they might get wider. The morphology, the shape, I mean, you can see the shoulders here are humped. The armhole, which is a very important thing for clothing fit, is really high on the 21-year-old, but it gets deeper as we age. The breasts get lower, the waistline lows, just the whole distribution of the body around our skeleton changes drastically, from age 20 to age 60 and above. And so this is actually an aspect of the apparel industry, the clothing industry and fashion that's largely ignored. You think I was just on a group talking about fashion the other day because it's New York Fashion Week, and there's all sorts of exciting things happening in fashion. And, they were saying, okay, so for women over 60, who are your favorite brands? Who do you buy? And then the first thing people were saying was, well, I can only buy XYZ brand because they only make, they're one of the only ones that make over a size 12 or 14. And the interesting thing is, it's not just the size that changes, but also the way that your body is, because sizes are based on circumferential measurements. but it's the way your body's distributed within that circumference. That so there's a lot of interesting work to be done in just regular clothing design, aside from style, which is a whole nother topic that we kind of touched on earlier, for women who are over 55, 60. So, you know, there's all sorts of press out there, you know, the idea of about being youthful, and the idea of staying youthful aesthetically is very important. And there are all sorts of quick fixes to sculpt your body in different ways. Or you could be like Ernestine Shepherd, who is the oldest bodybuilder, and she won the Guinness Book of World Records for her fantastically sculpted body. But we don't all have time to, you know, work out and make our bodies look like that. So there's just some things that clothing can do to help us. In the area of clothing research, there's a friend of mine actually came up with this functional aesthetic and expressive and aesthetic model of looking at clothing, because clothing needs to express things about us. It needs to have aesthetic characteristics, but one part of the clothing design mix that a lot of people don't think about is that functional aspect. And different approaches to clothing design emphasizes one or the other. Like right now at the New York Fashion Week and the big designers, they're really focusing on the aesthetic and the expressive, and the function may be a little less important. And the work that I do in clothing for aging and for making people be healthier and feel better really looks a lot at the functional, but you can't ignore those other two, because if you do, as I'll show you later when I talk about my work with hip protectors, people just won't use it and they won't wear it if it doesn't meet aesthetic needs and have express the values and self-esteem issues. So, first topic I wanted to share that I've worked on is breaking when we fall, or fall protection. And as you all probably know, for women especially, and in particular women with osteoporosis or osteopenia over the age of 60, if we fall, there is a great chance of us doing a downhill shoot and never really getting back to being fully functional. And I once again, I was talking to a friend. She said two women in her family broke their hips, and then they just kept going downhill. So the research shows that if you wear fall protectors, you can, they really do work to help you from breaking when you fall. But there was a big study done out of Holland, and out of like 1,200 people in this nursing home that they studied for the length of 4 years, they were all issued hip protectors. The major problem was compliance, because they didn't want to wear them. And I've bought and examined and, you know, analyzed hip protectors, and I don't blame them. Look at these lovely things over here on the on the right hand side. They're very, very tight. They're bulky. They just look very uncomfortable to wear. So I decided to do a study, and I combined qualitative research methods at the discovery phase, and I interviewed about 54 women in Oklahoma, in the 4 quarters of Oklahoma, and I asked them about their clothing behaviors and their attitudes toward the idea of wearing a fall protection. And this is a word map of some of the data that I discovered. And with that, you can see comfort and fit and loose were major titles. They wanted them to protect, they wanted them to be washable, but overall, even a few of the women had fallen and had hip problems from the fall. They said if it made me look fat or if it was uncomfortable, I really wouldn't want to wear it. So those aspects of comfort and fit are really essential in order to get the user to adapt technology for health and well-being when it's based around the body. So with the data that we collected about their attitudes and behaviors, we just defined design criteria. And some of the most important things was how tight or how much pressure there was on the skin. If it did have pads, they thought that that would be a good thing. They wanted it to be adjustable. Thermal comfort was an issue, and that meant not too hot and not too cold. Range of motion, tactile comfort, to be lightweight, to be wickable, which is pulling the moisture away from the skin, and to be able to easily get it on and off. A lot of the people we talked to had issues with continency, and so these pads here would just be really hard to get off in a pinch. So we took all of these components into mind, and we created a design that was blank in the front and blank in the back, and just had a waistband that was adjustable, and then adjustable straps at the thigh. And we didn't get into inventing a new type of pad. We used a pad that was already existing. But our goal with this particular aspect of the research was to find a design that they would feel comfortable in and wear. And so we did an overnight sleep test where women, they followed specific protocols of donning and doffing, and then we asked them to walk a certain distance and back, and to wear it for at least 8 hours overnight, and then to fill out some surveys, and then we did exit interviews after they'd gone through this experience. And we felt like our design was a success. They felt that the position was very good, and that was something we really worked on, because you look at the shape of the hip and where the socket is and where the pressure would come into, and how that is different on each person. So you needed to be able to adjust the height and the spot around the circumference. And so these were some of the results about the perceived comfort. And it was the idea of doing this design that was kind of open in the front and open in the back, and just strapped to the waist and to the thigh, seemed to be a successful concept. Our next step with this project is I'm working with some engineers to 3D print the pads themselves in a way that is absorbs the impact, because all of the pads that are pretty much out there is it just kind of transfers the impact from one side to the other, and it makes it less by having something in the middle to mediate. But what we're trying to do is to create like an auxetic surface that when the impact comes, the pressure goes all around the whole area of the pad. And that way it doesn't have to be so thick, it could be thinner. And so anyway, that's what we're doing, is trying to figure out a new material for the pads. And, I did some discovery through an NSF innovation grant to try to find other areas of people who might want to wear hip protectors. Like I thought mountain climbers and skateboarders and snowboarders and things like that. And I think there are a lot of areas where we might want to protect ourselves when we fall, where this could be quite interesting. Okay, so then the other area that I'm working on, I'm doing is related to sleep apnea and atrial fibrillation. So basically cardiovascular disease. This is a prototype of a shirt that we did. Once again, I worked with biomedical doctors and electrical engineers and computer engineers and apparel colleagues to develop a in-home sleep apnea testing device, I call it. It looks like a shirt that will get the respiration through the nasal cannula, through a band around the chest. It's an inductive band, and also an EKG, and kind of communicate all of those into a general central processing unit, send it through Bluetooth to the computer. And then we also had a pulse oximeter on the finger that was kind of independently sending the signals via Bluetooth. And we were able to get and I developed these electrodes using kind of off-the-shelf conductive materials, because one of the big barriers in this field is the idea of conductive materials. The research has shown that textile-based conductive materials have a much higher potential for a continuous long-term monitoring because they can cover so much more of the surface of the body, and they're depending on how they're made, they really do absorb the signals much more efficiently than metal. But this is a whole new area, so there are a lot of new research to be done. And one of my research groups I was just talking to the other day is a chemical scientist who has developed like a paste that is conductive, that really works well over cellulosic materials. So we're applying for an NIH grant together to create that new kind of conductive material on a garment that would be for the sleep apnea purpose. And so you can see from these signals here, we do have a very good similarity between the textile electrode and the standard electrodes. And we were able to work it out with a website where a cloud-based smart garment monitoring of the health biometric signals. And my graduate student, while I was on his committee in engineering, his dissertation was about negative emotion detection. So he was researching how he would show people, it was for the elderly, he would show people a movie that was really sad, and then he would have them do certain exercises, like I guess just adding 2 + 2 kind of takes your brain out of your sad mode over into a happier mode. And he used this shirt to monitor the EKG of those participants in his study. So he laundered it probably about 75 times. And over the course of that duration, the electrodes that I had made with off-the-shelf things started to deteriorate. They started to corrode. And so that pushed me here at WashU to start to build a new kind of a textile electrode with a technique that has not yet been published in the literature, that I'm really excited about. And I hope that we can make a good contribution to the area of textile-based electrodes. So another issue that happens as we age is our posture getting worse. You can see here at the diagram on the right, this young woman, and then as we get older, our back gets more curved, and we're, as much as we're trained to stand up straight and walk with a book. I don't know if any of you guys ever had to do that, but I did. And there are a lot of stuff that can be done in that area. Actually, this image on the left-hand side is a posture brace from the 1930s. And the one in the center is a posture brace that is available now. And what I'm looking to do is to integrate into a garment the stretch ability and to pull yourself back and to have a good posture. And what brought me to looking at that specifically was a study or it was actually a class that we had where we looked at, worked with wheelchair athletes. These guys are all either paraplegic or quadriplegic, and they play rugby. And they are just totally amazing in their abilities. And so we watch them don and doff their clothing. They have some specialized clothing to help them practice their sport, like these are gloves with friction so they can push the wheels of their wheelchair. And this young man, he has his front muscles are atrophied because the nerves are dead. And so posture is a big issue for him. And as when you're bent over, your lungs are kind of smushed a little bit more. So you have less ability to breathe if you want to maybe do a sport or even just in regular functioning. So one of the areas that I'm looking into is how to create a garment that would maybe not be as uncomfortable and as obtrusive as a brace, but would function to help people not only for someone like a quadriplegic with nerve damage, they may never be able to stand up straight. But I'm looking to make a device that will help people to enhance their muscles as well as just be supported, because I think that's the key. There are a lot of products out there that support, But if you, are just depending on support, then your muscles may not ever get that memory back to keep yourself straight. So, and then speaking of muscles, sarcopenia is one of the issues that is so important to think about as we age. And so with that, this is something I haven't gotten to do myself yet, but there is a product out there, actually a company based in here in St. Louis that has been working in this space. And this is a garment that I saw at the Cooper Hewitt in New York for an adaptive clothing exhibit, adaptive technology exhibit. And they have actuators that are placed at specific locations that will help to stimulate your muscles so that your muscle strength, your core strength can be enhanced as you're doing your activities of daily living, like sitting and standing and things like that. And the company that's here, it's called Agoji, and they sell a jogging pant that has elastic bands into it so that as you move, the elastic provides resistance. So even just simple walking is giving you more of a muscle workout than if you were just wearing regular pants. Because I think if we're able to integrate into our activities of daily living, then things that keep our muscles thinking as we age, then we have a greater chance of staying mobile for longer. The other issue, and this is the last one I wanted to talk about pretty much, is the idea of wandering. My mother had Alzheimer's, and we had no choice but to put her into a home where she felt like she was in a jail, and she had a monitor on her arm that connected to the doors, and it went off every time she got close to a door. And the psychological weight of that was just heartbreaking to see, because she wanted to be like everybody else, but we were just afraid that she would, wander off and not come back. So some of the things that we're doing in this space is putting GPS inside of a shoe, so that if you have the shoe on, you could always be tracked. And then also to put GPSs inside of clothing, so that as you're wearing just a regular t-shirt or something like that, so it's that psychological advantage of not because my mom just hated that bracelet that she had to wear. She just thought that was it was such a symbol of her lack of ability or of her restriction. So if we could integrate that into clothing and not really notice it, then I think the success, once again, the success of compliance would be much stronger. So in conclusion, I hope you'll agree with me that clothing can be more than just pretty, but even pretty clothing is important. And because it serves psychological, social, and expressive needs that are a part of being human. And at the same time, clothing has a lot of uses, but as we age, the needs really evolve. And as time goes on, I'm sure that we'll become more and more attentive to those needs, but it's still at a very emerging stage of looking at the older body as a site for creative design, and then also a site for technology enhancing clothing that will help us to stay happy, healthy, and safe.